Course 3, Lesson 1 is all about number line and comparing and ordering integers. Really just being able to look at numbers and see where do they fall and compare to other ones. Are they bigger, smaller? What is happening? So if we look at our different sets of numbers, the first one that we need to look at is integers. Now integers, as we can see, are whole numbers and they can be positive or negative. So we need to show this set of integers with a couple different things. First off, we need to show it with curly braces. And that's what these things are right here. They are just curly braces. Any set that we're talking about, we need to show them with curly braces to show when they start and when they end. Second, these dots on the end here, dot, 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 tell me that they go forever in each direction. So it doesn't just stop at -3, we continue with -4, -5, and so on. And it doesn't stop at 3, it goes on to 4, 5, 6, and to positive infinity. We can see that these are whole, big numbers, no decimals, no fractions. And we have 0, and all of the positive whole numbers, and the negative whole numbers as well. The other vocabulary term is element. Each one of these numbers inside here is called an element. 0 is an element of the integers, 3 is an element of the integers, 24 is an element of the integers. That's what we call them. Okay. When we talk about another set, counting numbers, we are talking about ones that you would use to maybe count how many apples you bought at the store or how many students are in the class. Once again, we show it with curly braces. Okay, curly braces. We start with 1 though, because I wouldn't start counting something 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I start with 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we show it with dot, dot, dot on the positive side. And end with a curly brace. This shows us that we start with 1 and nothing earlier, but we continue to positive infinity. Those are my counting numbers. Whereas my whole numbers include all of the counting numbers, but we add in 0. So now with our curly brace, we still don't have any negative numbers. We start with 0, and we continue on with 1, 2, 3, and so on. Okay? We are showing that we have an infinite amount of elements here, but really only on the positive side are we continuing. We just start with 0 and continue on. When we are comparing integers, remember that we can show these with an inequality sign. We look at -6 and 8 and say, well, we know that 8 is bigger, so we can say that -6 is less than 8. We can use this less than symbol to show that -6 is smaller than 8. Similarly, we can do something like 4 and -4. Since 4 is larger, like having $4 rather than owing somebody $4, we would say that 4 is greater than -4 and use that inequality symbol, showing that 4 is going to be farther to the right on the number line. All right. When we order things on the number line, when something on a homework or test says, put these numbers on or graph these numbers, we are talking about a number line. And we can see if we were to graph +5, -2, -4, 1, and -5, we would say, well, let's put a number line. We need to make sure that there's even spaces between all of the numbers, and we can put dots at -5, -4, -2, 1, and 5. We're going to put those there to show that that's what we have in our set. All right, we need to compare integers here, but you can look back at previous slides to see how we do that. The other part of this lesson is opposites and absolute value. When we talk about opposites, we are talking about if we are given a number, we need the other number that is the same distance away from 0 as our original. What this is saying is, let's say we start with positive 10. We would say that positive 10 is 10 units away from 0. Okay, 10 units. Well, its opposite will also be 10 units away from 0, but in the opposite direction. So still 10 units away, we get this negative 10. And that's what we would call an opposite. The other important thing with opposites is if we take a number, let's say 3, and its opposite, negative 3, when we add them together, we will always get 0. Always. So an opposite, we say it's a number that is the same distance from 0 on a number line, but in the opposite direction. We can add them together and get 0. Whereas an absolute value, we are talking about if we are given a number, we want to know the number of units or distance between an integer and 0. We would call this the absolute value. All we're saying is I want to know how many units away from 0 is it, the distance. If we're talking about distance, we're not going to have a negative answer. Distance isn't negative, so our absolute value isn't going to be negative. So let's look at some examples. If we were given the absolute value of 12, well, 12 is 12 units away from 0, so we do get an answer of 12. Let's go down to 2 minus 5. Well, we need to do what's in the absolute values first, just like parentheses. So we would say we really have the absolute value of negative 3. Well, negative 3 is 3 units away. All right, let's look at another one. How about negative 2 minus 9?
You didn't even jump.
I'm in the middle of a video.
Hey, everybody.
That was Mr. Nolan. If you couldn't tell, he just interrupted my video, but that's okay.
The absolute value of negative 2 minus 9. I don't really know. It's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 or 11. Take your pick.
Oh, well,
Take your pick.
The absolute value of negative 2 minus 9 is 11.
I had a 50% chance.
He did have a 50% chance. He said 7 or 11, and it is 11.
But it's right down there on Dayton. And so if you go, just like come back with a slice of pizza and a slushie or something like that. It tastes real good.
Oh, good grief. You are getting the full view of Mr. Nolan right now. All right. So let's see what else we have in this lesson. All right, let's look at some of the challenging ones here. As we look at these, remember that we must do what's inside of the absolute values first, and then we can do what's outside. So let's say we do something like this one right here, the absolute value of negative 21 minus the absolute value of 9. So if we take the absolute value of 21, that gives us 21. Absolute value of 9 is 9, and then we can subtract to get a final answer of 12. Whereas if we look just one below it, let's do the absolute value of negative 16, which is 16. We can do what's inside of the parentheses, so we get absolute value of 11. Okay, we need to continue doing absolute value, so 16 minus 11. And we get a final answer of, you guessed it, we have 5. Okay, so do what is inside of the absolute values first, and then we can do what is outside. Not all the time are we going to get a negative answer when we're talking about things that we need to subtract. So, for example, if we do the one above what we've been doing, the absolute value of negative 7 is 7, absolute value of negative 8 is 8, and then we would need to subtract. And as you can see, we get a final answer of negative 1, even though absolute values don't have negative answers. When we throw in negatives or subtraction outside of the absolute values, we can get final answers of negatives. Okay, so that is the end of lesson 1 for course 3. I hope that it was helpful. I hope now you can be able to graph points on a number line, compare and order integers, and be able to recognize different sets of numbers and finding the absolute value and opposite of a number. I hope this is helpful for your homework and for studying.